welcome into another edition of the Throwing Chairs podcast. We've got a lot to talk about once again here on TCP, but without further ado, I'm your host, Hayden Smith, joined alongside the Hoosier Network's finest, Audrey Marr and Thomas Montalbano, and joining us from the Indiana Daily studio is Daniel Flick. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Flick.
Oh, man, I am truly honored to be here. It's always a pleasure collaborating with HN. I have very fond memories of the Hoosier Network. I still need the merch. I
Gotta
talked to
get
Platt.
you some.
He said I have to work there to get the merch. I don't agree.
Makes sense.
It does.
I have to say, I haven't gotten my HN polo yet either.
You haven't gotten
No,
it?
I asked for it. I haven't gotten it.
We got to get you hooked up,
we'll
Thomas.
fix that.
We got to get you hooked up. Here soon enough, we will. But before we get started talking about the Illinois game that took place on Saturday, we're going to get this episode started like we do every episode of the Throwing Chairs podcast. And Flick, we're going to get you thrown in on the deep end here. Here is our icebreaker today. And this one is a little bit interesting. If you could go back in time and change one big mistake that your sports team made, either during a game or during a season, your favorite sports team, what would it be and why? Thomas, I kind of want to go to you first as a fan of the New York Knicks. The Knicks have not been too kind with history.
No. My brain went racing there immediately. I knew it was going to be something like this before we started the episode, and I tried to prep myself, and I couldn't. I've been through a lot. But times are much better now than they have been, I have to say, with this new era of Brunson and Anunoby and Randall. But it's beside the point. There is literally so much I can, initially my head goes to maybe messing up a draft pick or something like that, but they've made so many bigger errors.
Trying to think of some that they've swung and missed on.
They
a lot of technically miss on Porzingis.
Right.
Great.
Exactly. And RJ, but I thought RJ was fine, especially when you look at Zion and Ja's careers too. But there's a lot of the Knicks headlines too are like, oh, they didn't get Zion and then get KD and then they get Kyrie, but that's also not necessarily on the Knicks. It's also things not necessarily working out, but
nothing about Trae Young owning the Garden.
My head went to Trae Young, but it's like I don't know what I would fix on the Knicks that they did wrong. I mean, Trae Young, congratulations, you beat Elfrid Payton, who's now in the G League. So I don't know. Times are much different. I honestly don't even want to focus on the negative.
It's just turning on a Knicks podcast.
I think the Knicks are in a great spot, and I'm very happy with where they are, and I don't want to think about negative times, but I'm glad we are here.
Are you?
Compared to where we were. I'm happy now.
They're better. They're better. They're a playoff contender.
Yeah.
They are much better.
Audrey, I want to pick your brain here.
I literally can't think of a single moment, but I can think of literally anything that the Green Bay Packers have ever done. Except, this season. This season, they turned it around, but I would have said if they didn't say goodbye to Joe Barry, I would have said Joe Barry. It was I would say it's a horrible decision to keep them as long as he did.
Okay.
I guess we'll go with that.
What I've heard that you've got ties to the Atlanta area.
I do. Yeah. So the 28-3 Super Bowl came to mind very quickly, but I'm going a different avenue here. Okay. November 30th, 2013.
The fact that you know the date, this is going to mean something.
I had the day off actually by 5, but I looked it up because I wanted to make sure. I thought it would be more emphatic. Nick Saban trots out Adam Griffith for a 57-yard field goal with the Iron Bowl on the line.
Oh, no.
Yeah. 10-year-old me, a minute later, is just sobbing.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
The kick six. Every time the Iron... I still have nightmares, man. Chris Davis...
To be on the opposite side of some of the most incredible plays of all time, that's rough.
Yeah, but you know what? This year's Iron Bowl, I actually was driving home from the Purdue football game, Indiana-Purdue football. I had the radio going, 4th and goal from 28 was it? Yeah, oh my God, unreal. Oh, man. I don't know what speeds I was hitting in the Elantra in that moment, but it had to be through the roof.
See, so I could... As a Golden State fan, I obviously immediately think of 2016 blowing the 3-1 lead. Oof. But I'm also going to go in a different area. But here's the thing: all three of you aren't gonna know how big of a moment this was in sports history.
All I'm gonna say is you're not gonna get a lot of sympathy as a Golden State Warriors fan.
I'm not going basketball. I'm going NASCAR.
Oh wow.
So
Okay.
I'm a huge NASCAR fan. Right, I'm a huge Chase Elliott fan right now. Same with my dad, but I used to love a driver, and his name was Carl Edwards. He was easily one of the more explosive drivers I've ever seen. He had such a great personality. And in his last season, it was an unexpected last season championship. He tried to get off the lead lap and cut inside, and then he was turned, flipped, crashed into the wall, and then literally the next day said he was retiring, just out of the blue, in the middle of his prime. He was like 28 years old at the time of that. So
that's terrible.
Wow.
yeah,
I remember that very well, actually.
you do.
I do.
You do? Like,
I do.
seriously?
I am also a Chase Elliott enjoyer. Yeah.
Oh,
Dead
look at
serious.
this.
Yeah, I remember the day well.
Flick, we just became best friends.
Dude, we literally-
Yes, sir.
Oh, good
Let's
coverage
go.
there, too. Good
That was incredible. All right, well, let's move on now and let's recap this game that took place on Saturday at the State Farm Center, guys. Indiana lost a tough one to the Fighting Illini, 70-62. Just want to get your all's initial takeaways first off before we really dive in a little bit more on this game.
I mean, I can go. I'm gonna just touch on what we said after the discussion. I truly thought it was one of their better performances of the year, especially in a loss. Definitely one of their better. Not that any loss is a good loss, but it's one of their better games of the year for sure, especially without Kel'el, where once again he's such a massive loss, literally and figuratively. In the post-game conference, Woodson said he thought the team followed the game plan and executed it well, and I agree with him. It was a back-and-forth game really the entire time. I thought both teams were going to pull away at some point, and neither really did. But yeah, I'll just touch on some guys. Renew, 21.7 rebounds, 75% shooting until he fouled out. He's been a stud all season long, and he was once again. Mbako's first career double-double. I'm sure we'll get to him in a little bit once again. And then Xavier Johnson, I thought he was great, especially for how he's been playing. 14 points, looked very confident. He had some tough shots and some big shots that got the team right back in it. And yeah, a few assists, a couple of rebounds. I thought he had a great game. And then, of course, the other side of the game was they couldn't hit a free throw, 12 for 22, especially down the stretch. 0 3-pointers, first time in 14 years. And then 2 bench points on 2 total shots that'll very rarely win you a game. But I don't know. There's pros and cons to that game for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with pretty much literally everything you just said.
Yeah,
But,
that was
I mean,
a
you
total
pretty much
game
covered
recap.
everything.
What a show.
But, let's go, Thomas. But it definitely was one of their better performances, especially on the road. I mean, they're the number 10 team in the nation, and they held them to 70 and also with an 8-point game. So especially without their big men, I think it would have been a completely different game if Kel'el was healthy and playing in that game. But I mean, Xavier Johnson definitely filled that void. Mackenzie Mbako as well in the game, in the time that it was needed the most. And they definitely did change up their game plan a little bit. And we saw that in the small guard lineup, small ball lineup, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I mean, 0 of 9 from 3 and 12 of 22 from the free throw line is not going to get you anywhere. And I mean, if you were to make all those 3 throws, it could have been a different result.
Well, 100%. I mean, hindsight 2020. Yeah, there's a lot of different things that you're going to take away from this game. I whenever I walked away, I felt I took a lot more good than I did bad away from the game. Granted, again, it's a loss, and obviously that's not what Indiana fans want. But I mean, going up against a top 10 team in the nation and you hold them to 70 points, yeah, you only score 62, but you made an incredible ball game when a lot of people, including myself, didn't think it was going to be that close. But again, like you said, both Thomas and Audrey, not hitting a single three, just that honestly scares me because of where the game is going and where the game currently is, and you're just not able to hit a single three. Granted, they were able to find ways around that, especially with that small ball lineup. They had great defense down the stretch, just not able to get things done.
You know, I think in a vacuum, if this game had happened a month ago, it's a lot more of an encouraging, hey, this team is competitive, this team's good. Pretty much all the emotions that a lot of us had after they almost beat Kansas in Assembly Hall, where it's like, hey, they might actually be able to find that next level and elevate and compete. Instead, you find yourself 62-all with 1:05 to play, and you get outscored by 8 in the last 65 seconds. And that's there are no moral victories when you're 12-8 and 4-5 in the conference, and you have no quad one wins, and there are 2 days left in the month of January. And I think ultimately, you look at it, Indiana did a lot of things well enough to win. You shoot 46.3% from the field. You only have 9 turnovers. You hold Illinois to 70 points, I think 4th lowest margin this year. They did a lot of things well enough to win. They needed to win. They have, I think, 2 or 3 quad one games left this year.
I think it's 4.
Is it 4?
They've got 2 on the road and 2 at home, I believe. But again, even if you win all 4 of that, I still don't think your quad one record is good enough to make the tournament. We'll talk about that here in just a second.
That and the fact that their non-conference resume is still not very good. This is a win Indiana really needed to get, had a chance to get. Frankly, I think they led 21 minutes Saturday. I mean, they had everything they needed to upset and make that potentially season-changing win, get that win. Couldn't get it.
Exactly. I mean, stuff like that coming down the stretch. I mean, time's running out for Indiana, and their tournament hopes are looking bleaker and bleaker by the day. We talked really briefly about that small ball lineup that Indiana ran. I believe there were a couple times. There was once where it was Xavier Johnson, Anthony Leal, Gabe Cupps, Trey Galloway, and Malik Renew on the court at the same time. And as soon as that lineup checked into the game, immediately I was like, what is going on? Woodson has gone off the deep end. But boy, was that small ball lineup an incredible defensive lineup, and they went on incredible runs. I just want to pick your all's brains. It might not be here to stay because Woodson said that Illinois just kind of forced his hand by them going small. They had to go small. It doesn't sound like it's going to be here to stay, but is that something encouraging down the stretch that maybe Indiana can go to that a couple more times?
I was just gonna say real quick. I agree with everything you just said. I thought it was a very interesting but great lineup. It worked out really well, especially lining up against Illinois. Like you said, Woodson kind of had to do that. But another part of that was definitely Kel'el Ware's absence as to why they were doing that. But that worked out really, really well. I think that was part of why X had the game that he had. Again, it was a real bummer that those 2 free throws at the end couldn't fall to cap off really a great game. But yeah, I thought that lineup was awesome to see, honest, because we didn't really see it throughout earlier in the season. And when things aren't really going well, it is time to experiment and try different things. And I thought that was a really good call by Woodson.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I think it was really just because Kel'el Ware is obviously out, and Illinois is a smaller team. I think that was pretty much the main reason why I was utilized in that game. But you can almost compare it to Louisville's game where they switched to the zone defense later in the game, and they continue to use that throughout the season. So that could be something. I mean, if it worked a little bit against the number 10 team in the nation, it can work later on in the season, especially in the conference. And I wouldn't be surprised if they were to use it more in the season, but I think it was most likely only to be utilized against Illinois.
Isn't it ironic that Indiana, that struggled so much with all the guard play the whole year, runs 4 guards, and it just works? Like, isn't that ironic? How that works? Like,
it's a season in a nutshell.
Yeah, it really is. Kind of on a similar note, I think this season, in a nutshell, Xavier Johnson, you get a 6-year senior at the line. You have a chance to tie the game, and he misses them both. Last year, you think about the way that they finished so many of those close games.
Yeah.
This year, you get the guy you'd probably want, 77% career free throw shooter, one of your 2 captains, and he can't make the free throws, right? So the overall guard play in that game I thought was relatively encouraging. That stretch where they went with 4 of them was, I had the same thought of like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like that's.
But boy, was it great.
They were quick. So well. They were quick. They were intense. And those guys can do that. Like Cupps and Leal, they're not going to put up many shots. They had 2 combined shots, but they guard.
Hats off to Anthony Leal.
He played a very intense 16 minutes on Saturday. And, I mean, that's what he brings. He's a leader, high energy, infectious, and really competes. And, I mean, at the end of the day, he was very, very effective in his stint.
There was one time where Anthony Leal, I believe it was whenever Dane Danger was in the ball game. He wasn't in there for long, only 5 minutes. And on a side note, that blows my mind that Dane Danger has just his minutes dropped off a cliff. But that's a conversation for another day. But Anthony Leal was down low trying to get Dane Danger out of the lane, and he was fighting for his life down low, trying to keep his hands off the ball. And it looks so good to see somebody that probably hasn't gotten the role that he envisioned for himself coming out of high school, especially how good of a player he was here in Bloomington. And he gets these moments and he just plays his heart out, and that's what I love about Anthony Leon. That's what I will continue to love about his play. Yeah, I'll say I loved the small ball lineup defensively for the entire game. Indiana only held Illinois to 1.04 points per possession, which is a season low for the Illini. I thought their defense overall was really, really good, but again, like we said, just down the stretch, they weren't able to make some of those key stops, and obviously weren't able to hit their free throws. Guys, once again, we briefly alluded to it, how Indiana is now 0-7 in quad one games this season, and they have a couple more coming up, 2 on the road, 1 at Ohio State, the other one at Purdue, and then 2 at home against Wisconsin and Michigan State to close out the season. Guys, where does this really put Indiana in postseason talks? It really looks bleak that Indiana has any chance of making the NCAA tournament. But obviously, there's always an incredible chance that Indiana wins out the rest of the season. Again, I say incredible chance because it's very unlikely. But where does this really put Indiana in postseason discussions?
So sorry, did you?
No,
want to
go for it. I mean, I was just gonna say how I ended the article. I think their chances are. I worded it dwindling exponentially, and I think that's really what it is. I think every single game,
He's not wrong.
I mean, I'm just looking at the numbers. It's the truth. I thought 2 weeks ago when they played Rutgers, like that was the time to win, and they've gone winless since that point. It's not getting any prettier, and in fact, it's kind of going the opposite direction. Even if their play is improving somewhat, what matters is the wins, and they're not getting that done. And yeah, their chances of making the postseason tournament are very, very, very small. In fact, I think the conversation should be more towards the NIT if we even want to have that conversation, but.
I don't think Indiana wants to have that conversation.
No,
I would agree.
I don't think they do. But yeah, without win, I'm speaking the obvious. Without wins, I mean, this team is not going to make the tournament. They have to start against Iowa. I mean, they should have started a couple weeks ago. But it has to start somewhere, and all they can do is start tomorrow against Iowa.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the wins are what matters the most, and if things remain the same, the expectations are very low, and they're most likely not going to make the tournament. They're on a 3-game losing streak. If you keep on going downhill, of course, you're most likely not going to make it. But the thing is, Indiana does have a lot of talented players on their roster, but they just have never actually fully clicked. I mean, they have Xavier Johnson going out with an injury. Now they have their main 7-footer, Kel'el going out with an injury. No timetable for a return for him. Mike Woodson said he's not sure if he'll be available for Iowa, which could be promising that he may be back at some point, maybe Penn State. But still, again, with no timetable on that, this team has never had the potential to actually click and be on the same wavelength. So if they ever do, if this is the point in the season that they do click, I think there's a chance if they go win out, they would be an on-the-cusp team in the tournament. But if and when they click, that's the deciding factor, in my opinion.
I think we've seen time and again this year who this team really is. Like I mentioned earlier, 0-6 against ranked teams. 4 of those have been by at least 12 points. I think you reach a certain point where you start looking at all the flaws this team has, what they've done against teams that will be in the NCAA tournament come March, and you just realize they're not at that level. They're just not there, and it's frustrating for a lot of people. You look at Woodson's first 2 years in Bloomington, you have the expectation that they'll be there. They're just not at that level this year. They have, I think, a couple of solid foundational pieces in Renew and Mbako if they return for next year. The guard play, I don't think, is playing at a high enough level consistently. Feels like you get maybe X will play well one game, and you'll just see Trey Galloway just lay a complete egg, or vice versa, or you'll see neither of them play well, and that's how you lose by 20, which has happened on several occasions this year. It's just kind of like what you were saying, Audrey. They haven't put it all together. They haven't shown they can put it all together, and when they've had the opportunity to actually put it together, they just haven't been able to actually pull through on that. And then you see it time and again against these teams that are ranked and that are, like I mentioned, like top 10, top 15 caliber teams, and they're just getting run out of the building.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, you have to beat quality teams to be a quality team yourself and to make the tournament. They just haven't been able to do that. I mean, in all honesty, I look up and down the schedule and I think back, I can't even really pinpoint Indiana whenever Indiana's really put everything together for a whole 40 minutes this season. I mean, maybe some of the closest ones that come to mind is Maryland at home on December 1st, or heaven forbid, North Alabama on December 21st, whenever Indiana knocked in the most threes that they've had in quite some time. But, I mean, beyond that, it's been an Indiana team that has just reached for the finish line at just about every single game this season. Sometimes they've come up a little bit short. Sometimes they come just a fingertip longer and they end up winning that game. But yeah, I mean, I think Indiana can just about say goodbye to the NCAA tournament with just not enough quad one games left this season, and especially what they have done in the non-conference play and now in the Big Ten play. Heck, they can probably even say goodbye to the NIT and just get ready for the CBI. And if we're talking about that, we've hit new lows here in Bloomington.
If we're talking about the CBI, I think we're talking about nothing after the Big Ten tournament.
You're exactly correct. So as we're talking about postseason play, let's look at the National Collegiate Basketball Association a little bit on a brighter stage. And let's take a look at our Final Four predictions here, guys. We've got a lot of great teams here to cover. So far, the AP Top 25 that came out, UConn still at number 1, Purdue at 2, Carolina at 3, Houston at 4. I just want to check with you all and see who you guys are thinking the Final Four could potentially be come March. Audrey?
Yeah, I have some down, but I'm not, completely confident
You never
in
know.
my picks. One pick I am confident in is UConn. I think UConn will most likely get to the national championship once again, if not maybe go back to back. I think North Carolina as well, ranked number 3 right now. They're definitely up there. And I mean, so here I have an or. I have Purdue or Marquette. I thought at the beginning of this season, I remember thinking at the beginning of the season that Marquette was really, really good. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, they're still ranked. What are they, 9? They're ranked 9th. So, and they went up 5, actually, this week. So, I mean, I think if they play how they were playing at the beginning of this season, and especially like that in the tournament, they will go up high. But then Purdue, you never know. You never, ever know in
that scary 16 seed could come out of nowhere.
Yeah, you never know with Purdue in the tournament, but with how they're playing right now, you have to think of them as a Final Four team. And then my sleeper team, so that was an or, so that's not like 5. I'm not saying 5 picks. But my sleeper team, I would go with Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin definitely has a chance to go far in the tournament.
They're playing great basketball right now.
They're playing very, very good basketball right now. So that would be my sleeper team.
I'm going to have to go off that note because I have 2 of the same teams as Audrey.
I have a feeling we're probably all going to have at least one of the same.
Yeah.
The first that I have the same is UConn. I also don't know if I'm looking at different rankings or not, but I have them. I think they're currently number 5 on what you guys are looking at.
UConn's 1.
UConn's 1.
Oh, 1.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm looking at different rankings. I know that they were 1. I guess they still are. So they're also the current reigning champs. IU had a taste of them early on in the season, and it was a sore taste for the Hoosiers as they got kind of
destroyed,
stomped on. Yeah. And UConn's great. They haven't looked back since. Felix Akpar, they had a couple great players on their team. So I got UConn there certainly. Beyond them, we got Houston. Those 2 teams.
I like that pick.
I wouldn't be surprised if I saw either of those 2 teams in. Houston usually has a pretty good tournament run. They have been phenomenal all year long. And honestly, I just think they usually have a pretty successful tournament run. The next team I have the same as Audrey is Wisconsin. We saw them losing track of time, a week ago, less than 2 weeks ago. And they were great. I thought IU played a great game that game as well. Or not great game, but a solid game that game as well. And Max Klesman and the Badgers were just too much to handle. They have amazing 3-point shooters, which I think definitely matters.
Especially in the tournament.
Especially in the tournament. And yeah, Wisconsin has a lot of confidence in their play, and it's also somewhat a sleeper team. I don't think they usually make it that far, so I would kind of like to see them. I also have some buddies down there, so I'm supporting them. And the last team I wasn't so sure. I wanted to do another sleeper team as well, and I just went with Auburn because we saw them earlier this year, and they played great. I know they're still playing great. They've
struggled the last couple weeks.
Yeah.
But
okay.
They're definitely. I like that pick. They can be a sleeper team.
Okay. Well, I'm just thinking back to, I know it was a
Yes.
couple months ago at this point, but they were great against us earlier in the year. I know they have the talent, and I also think they're pretty decent in their tournament run. So those are my 4: UConn, Houston, Wisconsin, and Auburn.
Can't count out Bruce Pearl. Flick.
Yeah, for everybody listening in, Audrey is a Wisconsin native with the Wisconsin
Hey,
and Marquette picks.
I was not going on that. I actually literally forgot I was from Wisconsin when I picked Wisconsin.
Wow.
So.
There's always some type of intrinsic bias.
You know what?
there.
I'm not actually from Wisconsin, though. I moved there recently.
You
so.
grew up. Oh.
No,
Oh.
I grew up
Oh.
in Connecticut.
Oh,
UConn.
the UConn.
Wow.
Oh my gosh,
3 of the
I was
4
never
teams.
okay.
3
okay.
of the 4.
All right, so we have bias here on
we don't,
TCP.
We don't have bias. I was actually never ever a UConn fan when I lived in Connecticut. So, do I need to change my picks or
No,
something?
no,
I'm shocked you didn't have Indiana as the 4th in there.
Yeah.
Might as well.
Oh my
That's
gosh! Yeah, and then I'll put Virginia too.
Flick, you just wait for one of these segments here later down
Oh,
the
no,
road.
I'm done.
You just wait.
Oh, I'm done.
I actually get bullied on this podcast.
That's false.
That's
No,
all in
are
good
you
fun.
kidding me? Every podcast now, I'm going to be the one mentioning it for the first time. I'm sorry. For the first podcast, I had 2 players to watch, and then they make fun of me every episode. Okay. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
My
Flick.
final 4 picks. Yeah, I'm going to be very innovative, and I'll go UConn in there. Thomas, I'm glad you mentioned Auburn. Because I had
them
the
there?
same thought. Yeah, because, I mean, you watch Auburn put up 104 against Indiana, 106 something.
Yes.
A lot of points. They eclipsed the 100-point mark. They looked 104.
Yes.
They looked very impressive doing so. The shooters on that team, highly impressive. I think they're just playing at a high level right now. And not right now, but throughout the season, the talent they have,
Yes.
they're a team I have an internal feeling about that. It's like if they get hot at the right time, that offensive potential on that offense, we saw their potential firsthand, and that's a unit that I think could be pretty scary. I'll go Tennessee. I'll go 2 SEC teams in there. Number 5 currently in the poll, I believe number 3 in the net. I think they have a good blend. I think they're talented. They're consistent. This is a team that I think has a real chance come March to make an impact.
Phantom Hoosier Dalton Connect right there.
Sure. Yeah, I was actually just talking about him the other day with somebody. I was
That's
like,
amazing.
that guy can shoot it.
He's a
Yeah.
dog.
If only Indiana had. Oh, you know what? Never mind. Could have always used a shooter like that. But yeah. You know what? Maybe he'll be in the Final 4.
So
and then
win and a miss.
Then Indiana has a tie to the Final 4, which may be its only path to the Final 4 this year right now. And then finally, I'm going to go Kansas just because it's Kansas,
Yeah.
it's March. I have a hard time betting against Kansas in March. Important to note, do not have Purdue making it. Audrey, you mentioned you never know about
That's why
Purdue.
the "or" was in all caps.
Yeah.
So.
I'd say that you do know about Purdue and you do know about Matt Painter, and that what you know is you don't put them in the Final 4. Maybe they'll make it. Maybe this is the year.
Yeah.
But from what we've seen, from what we know of Purdue,
Yeah.
I have a hard time committing to that.
Yeah.
I'm with you guys. I think we're all right around there, and I'm also going to pick UConn in my Final 4 again. I think they're easily just the best team in college basketball right now. I mean, it's between them and Purdue in my eyes, but I think especially come March, we saw what UConn did last year in the tournament, and they just buzzsawed through everybody and absolutely just stomped their way to the national championship. And I think they very well could do that again this year. Defending champs, they just have a lot of swagger with them right now. I'm going to go with Houston as well. They've got the best defense in the NCAA, and I think that's going to go a long way whenever they get to March Madness. And they made a great run last year. They lost, I want to say it was the Elite 8 that they lost last season.
Yeah, it
of
was
course,
either that or Sweet 16.
exactly.
Yeah.
Of course, Kelvin Sampson down in Houston, Texas right now. They've got the best defense once again. I think they're going to go a long way. I've also got Auburn as a sleeper team. I think their ability to shoot the basketball, obviously, whenever they're hot, like you said, Flick. I think if they can get hot at the right time, they're going to be one of the more dangerous teams in the nation. And then my last team, I was actually kind of shocked nobody even mentioned them. I'm going to go Arizona. I think, once again, if Caleb Love can have a type of tournament like he had 2 years ago, I believe it was 2 years ago. Wow, time flies. If he can have a kind of tournament that he had 2 years ago, I think he can lead the Wildcats back to the Final Four. And I think they're playing really good basketball.
It's another possible Hoosier.
That's exactly right. Another swing and a miss. But I will say Tennessee would be right there for me. I think they very well could, but I'm going to go Arizona instead. Okay, so we've got our Final Four now. Give me your all's national champions.
I'm going UConn back-to-back. Leave it at that.
I'm going to do the same. I think UConn, I mean, I'm not going to repeat myself too much, but they've been the best team all year. That's why they're number 1 seed. They're the reigning champions. And then beyond being the reigning champions, this team is no stranger to championships. They've won 3 since 2011, 2014, 2023. This year would make it 4. They have 5 as a program. I just think they're the best team. I don't really see who's going to stop them. I think it would take a team like Purdue, and I don't think Purdue's going to make it that far. So, yeah, I'm going to go with UConn.
How about Rocky Top? University of Tennessee. The
Okay.
Volunteers. We'll go
That'd be
Volunteers
great.
here. I think it'd be a very fun champion.
Yes.
Very fresh. I don't think UConn repeat. Like I think UConn's probably the top team in the country right now, but I just have a hard time committing to any team repeating with how hectic March Madness is. So I'll go Vols here.
I like that pick. I like
True.
that
UConn's
pick.
going to be the team to go after. So everyone's going to try and go after the Huskies. How about you, Hayden?
I think UConn is and has been the best team. But in March, I'm going to go with that defense wins championships, and I'm going to go with the Houston Cougars. I think Houston is going to have a great run in March Madness, and I think their defense is going to take them all the way, and they're going to win it all. So I'm going to be very curious to see how all this shapes out, especially whenever the brackets come out. I'm going to be making probably about 50 of them because you can never have too many brackets. All right.
Real quick,
Yes,
according
go
to
for it.
my quick Google search, I think the last team to win back-to-back national championships was Florida in 2006 and 2007.
I think you're right.
I could be wrong. It's a quick
No,
Google search, but I think that's
you're
accurate.
actually correct there.
And only 7 teams have ever done it. Oklahoma State, Kentucky, San Francisco, Cincinnati, UCLA, Duke, and Florida. And since Florida, it hasn't happened since 1991-92.
Good job, Thomas.
I saw him
Little
looking
Googling for you
Good
right
job.
there.
I saw him looking out. I thought I was going to get dunked on.
I liked your comment. That's why I looked it up, because I
Yeah.
thought it was interesting. I was like, damn, yeah, I don't know who the last team to go back-to-back was.
It's like,
And
Flick, you
UConn
are
might be a bad
absolutely
pick.
incorrect.
Just send me
That
off
is
the
blasphemous.
No, honestly, no. Flick's point of I don't think teams are going back-to-back is what made me search that. He's right. I don't know. Doesn't seem to happen that often.
All right,
Me
well,
being right, not a comment.
well, Indiana comes back to Bloomington on Tuesday to take on the Iowa Hawkeyes, a team they have not beaten since 2021, and they will look to end this 3-game losing streak back home in Simon Scott Assembly Hall. Guys, what needs to happen for Indiana to stop this losing streak and get a victory back home? Audrey, I'll start with you.
I think this will be the bounce back game for Indiana, and even if Kel'el Ware isn't healthy, I do think that they know that this is the time in the season that you really needed to happen many weeks ago. But if you need to turn it around, you need to turn it around after a 3-game losing streak. So I do think Iowa and Indiana are pretty similar teams on paper. So I think this will definitely be a close game, but I think that this will be the game that Indiana will click on some spectrums. Some, is that the word?
Aspects,
Yes.
yeah, why not?
Aspects,
Yeah.
Aspects is better in some aspects, but there will still be those. They'll do good on offensive rebounding, but then they won't make their free throws, or they'll make those 3-pointers, but then they won't get their offensive rebounds. So
You're exactly right.
it'll just really be which of those that Indiana is successful in.
I think Indiana needs to have good guard play if they want to win, especially if Kel'el Ware is out. We mentioned it earlier this episode that they had great guard play last game, and it still wasn't enough. Granted, that was against a great Illinois team on the road, and now they're at home playing Iowa, who is not as talented. But still, I think throughout the season, the stories surrounding the guards have been a huge headline, and I think that'll continue tomorrow, especially with Ware out. So I think in order for them to win, they're going to need some good guard play. But if Kel'el Ware does play, that'll be a massive help, of course. And yeah, like Audrey said, we're going to touch on this in a few minutes, but I do think it's a must-win for the Hoosiers. I think the past couple games have all been must-wins, and obviously hasn't really happened, but it's never too late. I mean, maybe it is, but we'll see.
You never know with college basketball.
You got to start
You really
somewhere.
never know.
Right.
Iowa, in 6 of Iowa's 8 losses this year, it has scored fewer than 80 points. Defend. Indiana's got to defend at a high level. Iowa,
It's a really good offensive team.
very good offensive team. Iowa has lit it up in Assembly Hall many times in the past several years. Again, they just scored 88 points the other day. Their last 3 conference wins, 88 points, 86 points, 94 points.
Wow.
They can fill it up. Conversely, their last 2 losses, 70 points, 67 points. Indiana, fresh off a very strong performance defensively against Illinois, going to have to repeat it against Iowa.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, this Iowa team, they play extremely fast. Their average possession length is only 15 seconds out of the 30 seconds on the shot clock. And they're also an incredible team at not turning the ball over. And you really don't see that with teams that play at a very fast-paced style of basketball. And usually they turn the ball over quite a bit because you're just playing so fast. But Iowa, they're fast, but they're under control and they're very disciplined whenever they are playing this fast. I think I agree with you, Thomas. Indiana needs really good guard play. I think X needs to have a good carryover game playing back in Bloomington after his game against Illinois. And if he can continue, I think Iowa's going to be a better team because of it. But yeah, I mean, if Indiana loses this one, that's 4 consecutive losses. And I think fans just really will start to turn on Indiana at that point, especially with the season looking so bleak. So let's get started with one of the more controversial segments here on TCP with our player or players to watch, Daniel Flick. So
Oh my gosh! And you look
Let's-
straight at me.
Hey, I'll start.
I never looked at you at all. If you're talking
I
about
thought you
Flick,
looked over at me.
I looked at Flick's eyes the entire time. I can't keep my eyes off of him. Flick, you get us started.
From Iowa or from Indiana?
From Indiana.
From
Excuse
Indiana.
me. Yeah, I apologize.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Player to watch in Indiana. I will say Kel'el Ware. That is for me the main headline here. Is he active? Is he inactive? Is he? I think it's important to note here, he was walking without a boot the other day.
Yeah.
He was participating in the half-court shots pregame. Looked
Yep.
like he was having a fun time.
First time of the season.
Yeah.
Especially going against Owen Freeman.
Yeah. Big matchup. He's a rather large individual, too.
6'10", 230 pounds.
Yeah. So I think Indiana, if Ware plays, Woodson mentioned that he thinks that kind of changes the complexion of how they are as a team the other day. So if he plays, I think that's ultimately something Indiana really needs in a game where, again, scoring will be high. Kel'el Ware is second on the team in scoring, also the leading rebounder for Indiana. When Iowa, again, it could be a rare miss, but when a miss happens, Indiana, not exactly a great rebounding team, needs its best rebounder.
Well, Flick went with the player to watch route. I'm going to go with the players to watch. I'm going to throw Ware in there. I'm not going to add much. Flick nailed it.
Thank you.
If he plays, I mean, I don't need to say how much he means to this team. Ware would be the player, my number 1 player to watch if he plays. If he does not, I'm going to go with X, as Hayden mentioned a couple minutes ago. I think he's coming off a great game, and he'll need another great game if they want this win, especially against Iowa's guards. And then also for personal reasons, I think it would be huge for him And I think that's very possible, especially coming off last game.
Yeah.
The last player to watch I want to mention is someone we haven't mentioned this entire episode. It could definitely be a surprise, but I'm honestly looking at CJ Gunn. He got 0 minutes last game, and I don't know if that's the first time all season, but he's definitely had a role, even if it hasn't been massive this entire season. He's had a role on the team, and last game, I don't know if it was some sort of punishment for the ejection the game prior, or if Woodson just wanted to do smaller rotations, which that definitely could have been. But
considering he didn't do it to X, I highly doubt that was, and especially
That's definitely true.
Especially Woodson's response to the ejection.
Right.
I highly doubt that was the case. I think it was more of a personnel decision, and you're exactly right. That's the first time he has played.
That's very important to know. You're right, and that's likely the reasoning. But if Gunn does play, we've talked about Indiana needing shooters, specifically 3-point shooters. Gunn has been on the better side of that for Indiana. And so I'm going to look at Gunn. I think personally for him as well, he would love to have a great performance.
Well, you picked all of my picks. We're kind of on the same wavelength.
we've been on the same
Every
page
time we
all
always
year.
we're on the same
So
page.
that means you're going players.
No. You know, I was, but you know what? I won't. I will just go.
Let's go.
I will just go with Xavier Johnson. I really do think that he's on the right path right now. And you saw in the Ohio State game, he had 18 points, but he didn't have the best mentality still. So I think this was a game that he had a much better mentality heading into it and throughout the rest of the game. And I think that it's just continuing to grow. So, I mean, he's turning into that leadership role again that Indiana desperately needs right now. And I think that from now on, Xavier Johnson will be consistent in that role, especially getting the starting job again.
Yep.
I think that was a massive part of it, is that he hadn't been starting for Indiana. Gabe Cupps was getting the start. And now if he's back into that role, I think that's huge for him. Personally, and I see him having a massive game. And this is an or pick. I'm not saying that he is my player to watch. If Kel'el Ware does not play, I'm going to say Malik Renew, obviously. He will be desperately needed in the paint, and he's one of the most dominant players in the Big Ten right now, so I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Audrey. I'm going to go with Xavier Johnson as well. I think if he can carry over what he did against Illinois and stay out of his head if anything goes south, which they will here eventually no matter what. I mean, things aren't always going to be perfect. So if he can stay out of his head and continue to play like he has been playing, especially against Illinois, I think he'll be a big reason why Indiana can defeat the Hawkeyes. Can I just really quickly point out how big of a water bottle Thomas has right now?
I was thinking about that.
This thing is massive.
Stay hydrated, folks.
That is a massive.
I thought you guys were going to say something in the beginning, and it
I
never came
love
up.
it.
Oh my
And
god.
then
got it
Audrey's got
recently.
the Stanley over here.
Oh yeah, the good old basic. Hey, it gets the job done.
I heard that thing hit the table as soon as you put it down.
It's just a tank.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
that's-
I got 7 a.m. through 9
I'm
p.m.
over here with a little
Got my
bit of
ounces,
water bottle, and
the
then
screen.
Flake's just.
I got a Powerade with vitamin water. It's a Powerade bottle with vitamin
Let's
water.
go.
I
Get
have
the
another one.
electrolytes.
It's the flavor.
I have another
Yeah.
one down here too. I got 2 of them on me.
I'm glad we all got
Let's
something.
go.
That's very good looks.
Hey.
We should always stay hydrated.
Yes. Stay hydrated.
I could probably bench that. I mean, oh my.
Yeah, no, this is
You could bench that.
it's nice.
You
Fill it
can,
up once a
you
day.
can do curls with that.
Yeah.
You want to
really
just you wanna
could.
curl it a little bit?
15, 10 pounds, I don't know.
Testing it out. All right.
Maybe more than 10, I don't know.
The agent providing fitness. information around
I
here.
know.
What
And
a-
the
what a
new
production.
strength and conditioning program of Indiana Athletics.
If
honestly-
HN's doing it, we're not going to have very athletic people.
I feel like I could throw a couple
We've got
stickers on here.
very few.
Make it look pretty.
All right, well, let's end this podcast with the final segment, and we're going to get our score predictions here with Indiana against Iowa. Flick, I'm going to go straight to you, being our special guest
yeah.
on the podcast. Flick, who's going to win, and what is the score going to be?
I was hoping I'd start off. I'll go
Good.
Indiana 82, Iowa 75.
Okay.
I think it's a high-scoring game, relatively speaking. Not sure what the over-under is, but I still think Indiana wins. My personal belief of this Indiana team, like I was saying earlier, not very good when playing nationally ranked teams. The Big Ten, to me, has 3 pretty clear standouts, Purdue, Illinois, Wisconsin. Other than that, it's a lot of a lot of teams that are very similar to each other. And I think Iowa, I mean, record-wise, the exact same as Indiana, 12-8, 4-5 in the conference. I think Indiana, when presented with similar matchups this year, has won by about 10 to 12 points. I think this one's a little bit closer because I think it'll be higher scoring. And again, Iowa just seemingly always finds a way at Assembly Hall to put up a lot of points. So I do think Indiana wins. I think it's a close game. I think it'll be an entertaining game, but I think Indiana ultimately snaps the 3-game losing streak.
Thomas, let's go to you.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I love Flick's score. I love everything. I love the reasoning behind it. I'm not going to steal it just because I feel like I can. That's pretty lame. But I'm going to take.
Fair, I was the closest last week.
Oh my
I knew
goodness.
this was going to come up too. But I'm going to take Flick's same point differential, and I'll go 79 to 72 IU. I'm not going to really add too much reasoning. I think Flick nailed it, and I love his score. And I might have said something exactly the same if he didn't go first, but I'll keep the same point differential and the same reason.
My bad.
Audrey.
79-72 if I didn't say it. I don't know if I said that.
I'm going to go with a much higher score. I do think, along with you guys, this is going to be a very high-scoring game. And especially if Kel'el Ware does not play, they lose that factor on the defensive end. So I think that this is the game that Indiana, I said it before, this is the game that Indiana bounces back in. And they're going to have the environment of Assembly Hall behind them. I mean, I think both the team needs this and Hoosier fans need it. So I think that the Hoosier fans are going to be as loud as ever, and I'm going to go 90 to 84 Indiana.
Wow.
Okay,
Yeah.
Indiana gets the 90 mark against the Iowa Hawkeyes. Okay, I'm going to go a little bit lower scoring, and I will. This is one of the first times in a long time that I think all of us have picked Indiana to win a game.
Wow.
Definitely.
Wow.
So I'm going to go with the Hoosiers, and I'm going to go Indiana. I have it differently than I have it on my doc, but I just came up with a new one because it's not been said yet. We made that rule early on in the season. I'm going to go Indiana wins 75 to 70 over the Iowa Hawkeyes, and it's a little bit lower scoring. I think Indiana's defense proves to be a game changer in this one, and then offensively they figure things out once again, and they're able to score a little bit more and score in bunches at times. So. Okay, good podcast.
Solid.
Good podcast.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good
Well, that's
ending.
going to do it for this episode of the Throwing Chairs podcast. Be sure to follow the Hoosier Network on all of our social media platforms to stay up to date on Indiana basketball. Flick, you ready for this?
Oh, I'm so ready.
Until next time, alongside Audrey Marr, Thomas Montalbano, and our special guest, Daniel Flick, I'm Hayden Smith, hanging up the phone on this episode of TCP. Have a great day, Hoosier fans.